Okay, welcome back to another session of Empowering the Healer Within. I'm your host, Peter Van Twyver, and this is season 2 of Self-Care for Healers online masterclass series. And it is my privilege and honor to introduce Kathleen Prasad. Kathleen is the founder of Animal Reiki Source and president of the Shelter Animal Reiki Association. She's a Reiki practitioner and teacher with over 23 years of experience. And she has pioneered the profession of Reiki for animals, creating the Let Animals Lead method of Animal Reiki. So Kathleen, welcome.
Hi, Peter and everybody. Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So how did you get interested in working with animals?
So I guess, like so many people probably listening right now, your life path kind of comes unexpectedly. And it's like when you're making other plans, then your sole purpose presents itself. so kind of for me, that's what happened. I thought I was going to be a middle school teacher for my whole life. I taught middle school in San Francisco for 10 years and loved it, absolutely loved it. I taught history, I taught English, I taught drama, I did the drama program. I really loved it. And then I found Reiki, and I found Reiki through my mother-in-law, who forced me to get a treatment. She's like, you have to try this, it's so great. And I was humoring her to get a Reiki session. I'm like, this sounds really weird, but I guess, okay. And the first experience of the Reiki treatment was so powerful and calming. And I had suffered from anxiety, severe anxiety and panic attacks since I was little, since I was about 3 or 4. And it was just kind of the way that my life was. And so my world became smaller because things would make me anxious, crowded places. I hated traveling, all these things. I just stopped doing them to avoid the anxiety. And just was a very fearful, anxious person. And then I'm on the massage table getting my Reiki session. And I was completely relaxed within 5 minutes. And I heard this little voice inside saying, all is well. And I'm like, what? My inner voice is always saying the sky is falling. What do you mean all is well? And I just knew that this was the modality for me. And so I got up off the table and I said to Martha, who was my very first Reiki teacher in Colorado, I said, how do I learn how to do this? Because I knew it was my path to healing for myself. And that set me on this Reiki journey. But then right after I took a level 1 class, I went home to practice. And my dog came. I was sitting doing hands-on self-treatment, which is one of the things we learn in Reiki 1 certification class. And I was doing this, I was sitting on the couch, and my dog, Dakota, at the time, he was an Australian Shepherd mix that I had rescued from the Sacramento County Animal Control here in California. And he was always by my side, but very, very polite because he's a shepherd. And so he's always 3 feet sitting at my ankle, 3 feet away, very polite. He comes over and he lays awkwardly on top of my feet, in this weird position. I'm like, what are you doing? And suddenly it occurred to me, I think he feels what I'm doing and he likes it. And so after he did that every day, he would come over, and the 3rd day, I'm like, I wonder if he would like some Reiki. And so I sat down next to him on the floor and I put my hands on him, and he rolled on his side and he took a big sigh. Finally, Mom, gosh, I've been trying to tell you for days that I love this. And so that moment, that accidental moment when my dog, showed me something new about Reiki, that changed the course of my life. Because in that moment, I realized not only, animals love Reiki, this is really interesting, and it makes them feel relaxed and, all is well also. But B, they already know what it is. I wasn't trying to give him Reiki and then he came, was like, okay. I was just minding my own business doing Reiki for myself, and he came over and somehow took some for himself and was taking part, with me not even knowing. So I'm like, wow, animals understand this energy. Reiki means spiritual energy. Animals understand spiritual energy. They understand energy so much better than humans do. And I mean, all of us who have animals, we know how our animals hear things better than we do. They smell things better than we do. Some animals see things really well, right? Certain birds can, like hawks, can see things from way when they're flying in the sky. They could see a mouse way down on the ground. So animals have developed these senses. So of course, it makes sense that their energetic senses are also more highly developed than we are, right? And so that moment with my dog, that very first moment, it just sparked something within me. I was so fascinated. And at the time I was walking dogs at a local animal shelter right near the San Francisco airport. And I was going there twice a week, and I was just dog walking. And so I kind of sheepishly went into my volunteer coordinator, and I'm like, hey, I just learned something called Reiki. Can I try it with the animals? And she's like, well, what is it? And I'm like, well, it makes you feel really, really relaxed. It's very healing and relaxing. And she goes, well, I don't exactly know what it is, but it sounds good. So yeah, go ahead. After you walk the dogs, feel free to bring them back and do some Reiki, whatever that is on them. So that's where I started to really get my experience with animals, because I was, sharing Reiki with all kinds of dogs from different situations, backgrounds. Some of them had been abused, some did not trust people, some had been traumatized, some had been neglected and didn't really have a good relationship with human beings, or being slightly fearful. Some of them were just afraid to be in the shelter setting, right? Just being there itself is very traumatic for a lot of sensitive dogs. And so that's where my journey with Animal Reiki really began. And it's funny now because, thinking I was going to be a middle school teacher, and then pretty soon animals took up all my time. And I told my husband, I have to retire from teaching because I don't have time. And that's, and back in 2004 is when I retired, early retirement from teaching, and began to do Animal Reiki and started my company, Animal Reiki Source, full-time, doing Animal Reiki treatments for people and starting to slowly teach. And in 2007, I founded Shelter Animal Reiki Association, which is my, nonprofit that focuses specifically on shelter and rescued animals. And so now we have over 200 members all over the world doing this, all trained in the Let Animals Lead method of Animal Reiki, which I evolved from human Reiki teachings. And so my whole world just really opened up from that first moment that my dog said, hey, can I have some of that?
Well, that's an amazing story. So did you find that there was a lot of difference working on humans versus working on animals with Reiki?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because a lot of people say, well, Reiki's Reiki, what's the difference? There's not really an animal Reiki thing. And for me, it's like, if we talk about Reiki as spiritual energy, then yeah, that's true. There's just energy, right? It's all one. We're all one, right? So in that respect, if I'm doing Reiki for animals, humans, we're tapping into the same space. But the way we tap in matters, because animals are super sensitive. And especially I was working with a lot of animals who, for them, hands might be scary, right? They've never had a kind hand. And in human Reiki, hands-on Reiki on. I mean, it's a hands-based touch modality. So I started to notice right away, when I tried to apply all the methods I learned for humans, that there was a certain percentage of animals that I couldn't work with. They didn't like hands. They got nervous if they saw my hands. So there was that physical aspect that was, what I did initially, which I would not recommend this to my students. Before I had evolved my own Let Animals Lead method, I was still trying to lead the session. if I was working on a horse that tried to walk away, oh, I would just tie him up. Okay, now he can't walk away. Now I can do all my hand positions. He's moving away from me. And I'm like, that's okay. He can't move too far. I've tied him up. Oh, I'll put a dog on a leash. Oh, a cat is trying to leave the room. I'll shut the door so they can't get out. I'm doing Reiki on them. And, that didn't feel right, even though I'm like, well, I'm following all the protocol that my teachers taught me. I'm doing Reiki the right way. But the animals were telling me, we don't like this. And I realized that for me, Reiki meant all is well. And it was really important to me that that's what it meant to animals too. And so I thought, well, what can I do about my behavior or the way I'm applying this to animals to help them feel as safe and comfortable and good as I do when I'm receiving Reiki. And so that's where my methods started to evolve. So the first thing I had to let go of was touch, because as I said, hands often not good for some animals, and other animals are just super sensitive to touch. So I could be across the room and they're much more comfortable, or across the paddock and they're much more comfortable than if I'm right up next to them. So having to let go of that physical, proximity, that was tough, because that's what I had always used for human beings and still use when I do human sessions. It's all touch based. But the second thing that came also along with letting go of touch was my thoughts. And, as I said, our animals are really sensitive. And some of you probably who have animals at home, who have cats, who have dogs, they sense your emotions, right? So if you're like upset, a lot of times your dog or your cat will come over and comfort you and sit with you. Like they just know your mood and your feeling, because emotion, mood, thoughts, that is all energy. And our animals really sense that. And so I started to notice that if my emotions were a little chaotic, if I came in to a shelter to do Reiki from a stressful day and I was like, ugh, animals would walk away from me or wouldn't want to connect. I also found that if I went to someone's house, let's say they had a cat and their cat had an issue, and so they would sit and tell me all about their cat. My cat has, arthritis or whatever their issue is, and they're all worried about it. Their cat is already, as they're talking about the issue, their cat's getting all tense. And then I'm focusing on the issue. The cat's like, yikes, I'm getting out of here. So I started to see that to help animals feel comfortable, it's not just about what our physical body is doing when we're sharing Reiki. It's about what we're thinking. And so over time, in the Let Animals Lead method, what I learned to do is just that, let animals lead. How close do they want to be? And how can I make my thoughts, my emotions, as calm and peaceful and positive as possible? So if you think of our emotions and our thoughts as like waves kind of coming out from us, like waves of energy. So do you want the waves that you're sort of creating in the animal space to be a turbulent storm? Or do you want it to be a nice, calm, like the surface of a pond, right? It's very calm. And animals sense that, those waves or that calmness coming from you. And so that's another big piece of the Let Animals Lead method. And, with human Reiki, a lot of times you don't even think about that because we're not that sensitive, and so those, and through this all learning how animals teach us, I remember there was one dog in a shelter who they asked me to work with, and he was very depressed and just didn't even lift his head. And they said, oh, he's really depressed. He just is shut down from the shelter environment. Can you sit with him? So I went and I sat outside his kennel, and he didn't even lift his head. Nothing, just sit. And so I sat with him, but I stayed positive in my mind. I just rested my hands on my lap and I meditated. I meditated on peace, calm, all is well. There's specific meditations that I teach in my Animal Reiki classes, but really seeing him as perfect in this moment. Everything's okay. You're safe. All is well. And just sitting with him. And I'll never forget at the end of the meditation, I always do Gassho to thank the animal when I'm finished. And I went into Gassho and he lifted his head and he came over and he started wagging his tail and he rolled on his back and he showed me his belly and his tail was wagging. And it was like the spark came back on in his eyes. And so to see how much we can help an animal feel better, and we don't have to touch them and we don't have to push anything on them, but just really creating like a beautiful sense of peace and love and like compassion without judgment, not focusing on all their ailments and what's wrong with them, but really just that positivity. It just completely shifts animals and helps them to feel so much better. And so that's really been, I've seen it so many times, and I love the stories from my students, and it really motivates me to be doing what I'm doing.
Oh, it's an amazing story. So therefore the training that you get as an animal Reiki practitioner has to be different from human Reiki training.
Yeah, so what I include in my training is all the basics of a Reiki 1 class for humans that you would learn, those basics, because we want to learn how to do Reiki for ourselves and for the people that we love. But then the emphasis is really about how do I now use a specific approach with animals that doesn't make them nervous or uncomfortable, that doesn't push anything on them, and that takes into account what are my thoughts. And so you really get everything, except I don't teach massage table treatments. I teach chair treatments. And that's because for people. And that's because when you're in a shelter environment, or if you're at a farm or you're at a stable, it's much easier to treat a person just in a chair. Mm-hmm. And so we don't have as, the big massage table you have to lug in, have the person lay down. We do a little more of a casual type human Reiki session that you would learn.
Makes sense. Yeah. So would you prefer people that take your Animal Reiki class to have a Reiki background or not have a Reiki background?
I have students from both, really. But what I find is that it's easier to just come in fresh, because otherwise you have to unlearn all the touch stuff that you just learned. You're like, wait, hands on, Reiki on, what happened? I'm like, no, let go of your hands, put your hands in your pockets. So it's sometimes hard for human Reiki people to make that jump. And one of the things I always say is, our Animal Reiki is about touching hearts, not touching hands. And so sometimes it's easier to just start fresh with this approach. But it's funny because, when I originally learned Reiki, it was for me, for my own anxiety. Then my animals started showing me. So I started, learning, and the animals in the shelter were showing me things. And I was like, oh, that didn't work. I bet I shouldn't do that. They were really teaching me. But I was learning. The only classes in those days, back in the 90s, were human Reiki classes. They didn't have Animal Reiki classes. And so I did a lot. My first 7 years was all pure, just intensive human training. And I would go into hospitals and do treatments. I would go to people's homes. I a few times went into hospice situations with people. So I was doing a lot of human-based treatments. And I realized I'd rather be standing in a pasture with a horse. I'd rather be sitting in the aisle of the kennel with all the dogs, or in the cat room at the local shelter. I realized, the animals are really what, and just seeing them relax and let go of their stress and see their suffering lift just from something as simple as meditating with them. Like it was so incredible. So I kind of realized the human thing may not really be for me. And so I really focused in my first years when I started Animal Reiki Source in 2004 and leading, in those years, I just went to people's homes. I went to barns. I went to farms. I went to shelters. I went to sanctuaries. I was just all about the animals, right? And the funny thing was the animals brought me back to the people, because I just said, oh, I just want to do animals. I just want to do animals. And then I would be in the shelter with all the dogs, and I would look around and notice the staff had just done like a huge dog rescue, and they were all completely stressed out. And I'm like, hey, would you guys have time for a little short 10-minute sessions? I can, on my lunch hour today, why don't you guys come in and give you guys 10-minute chair treatments? Oh my God, could you? The dogs look so relaxed when you do Reiki. Could you do that for us? Today was such a hard day. And they were so grateful. And then I would go to like a farm sanctuary, and they would have done like a big rescue of a bunch of animals that came in all traumatized and all. So I'd be there to help the animals. And then I'd notice, and all the staff were like, they were just so like stressed and upset. And I'm like, well, after I finish the animals, do you guys want to, oh, could you really, and, or I would go to someone's house even. And a lot of times people ask me to come to their homes if their animals are dying, and so I would be there, and I would be sitting in meditation with their animal who's close to their transition. And the animal's I'm okay. Can you help my person? And I'm like, the animal might be dying, but really they're okay. They understand how to do this. But I look at the person, they're in so much pain. So I would say, would you like some Reiki? So it's really funny now, really what I teach and what the Let Animals Lead method really brings forth is sharing that beautiful compassion and peace with animals and their people together, and healing together. And that's why I was really interested in speaking for this summit that you're doing about self-care, because I really feel that when we want to help our animals, we also have to help ourselves, because our animals worry about us. They know when we're stressed. They know how much we care for them and how worried we get when they're sick. And, I remember when my dog Dakota, the dog that I told about my very first session, when he was in hospice from lung cancer, when he was 16 and a half, I tried to do Reiki for him, and he would have no part of it. He would just drag himself away. And I was so emotional and stressed. And I'm like, one day I just was like, it was like the third time I'd try to do Reiki, and he tried to just leave the room. And I was like, I just put my hands on my heart, and I'm like, Dakota, why don't you want Reiki? And he stopped, and he looked in my eyes, and I stopped, and I looked down at my hands, and I'm like, oh, I'm the one who needs Reiki right now. I'm the one. I need to do self-care. And I'm like, you're right, Dakota. I'm going to stop right now trying to chase after you with Reiki. I'm going to sit and do Reiki for myself. And he took a big sigh and he laid down, and I'm like, oh my God, that's what he needed. He needed me to care for myself. And so that was really how I helped him the most, was by keeping my own stress and everything in check. So I think that idea of really caring for ourselves is as not a selfish thing. It's something that deeply helps our animals and lightens their load when they're struggling with something.
Speaking of lightening their load, humans have sacred contracts. I'm not sure if your belief system is aligned with that, but I think we're brought here. We have a mission. We have a sacred contract. We're supposed to be here to do things, whatever that may be. Do you think animals have the same thing? They have the same gig? They have a mission?
I do. I mean, and I believe like every animal, and the mission doesn't necessarily have anything to do with human beings, but sometimes it does. But I do believe that animals are sacred, sentient beings, and they have a tremendous value above whatever purpose they serve for human beings. They have their own purpose. And I think if we look at our planet right now and everything that's going on, with climate change and even with the pandemic, a lot of that we can see comes from human beings misusing Earth's beautiful, nature's gifts, whether it be the animals or whether it be water or air or trees, right? We don't see an inherent sacredness and purpose for anything other than ourselves. This is like a huge human failing. And so I believe that one of the big lessons that not just animals, but all of nature is trying, it's silently teaching us, but I think more and more people are waking up to this, is they are saying that, we all have a sacred purpose on this planet, and it is independent of you, human. This is why we are here. We're like all part of this interconnected web, and we all are truly important to each other. We just don't necessarily realize it. We just see it in terms of, oh, how can I use this animal for my own goals, right? And so I think seeing this a sacred contract as being something independent of our own selfish wishes and desires is something that can really help us to elevate the way that we see animals in the world, the way that we see their purpose. Because a lot of times we see everything in terms of our own, what we're doing, right? And what we need. And so to see it sort of in a higher, more elevated level, I think can really make a big difference. But I do believe that, many animals find their way to us. I think Dakota found his way to me. And I think that his purpose on this earth became much bigger than just being a dog. Because now, I still tell his stories. I'm telling his story today. And, people, my students, a lot of people, hundreds of thousands of people know who Dakota is. And he was just this little rescue from a shelter. And so how can a little rescue from a shelter become a spiritual teacher to so many people? Like, this is the kind of lesson that animals can teach us.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I totally love the idea of let animals lead, because they do teach us. Animals can be great teachers. But it also seems like animals have their own, there's resonance there. So if a pet comes into your life and you choose the pet, perhaps the pet chose you, there's some resonance there. There's perhaps a contract where the animal shoulders some of our burdens. For instance, I've seen a lot of pet owners with, well, let me just say that the pet owner will say, oh, my dog has anxiety. And if you look at the owner has anxiety, and it seems like the dog is trying to shoulder some of that burden.
Absolutely.
Would you agree, like the dog will take on some of the issues of the owner to try to help the owner and teach the owner?
Absolutely. I mean, animals who live with us they are so compassionate to us. They would give everything to help us. They are selfless, something that as human beings comes very difficult to us. Human beings as a species are very selfish, and our companion animals that come live with us are very selfless. So they come and they just are an open book to us. What do you need? I'm here for you. And yeah, they do energetically, they do they sense when we are out of balance, when we're suffering, and they, through their presence, their compassionate presence, they uplift us. And part of it too is the way they look at us, the way they see us. When your dog looks at you, you're like, if only I could be as good as my dog thinks I am, right? They just look at you and they see you as, perfect. And they don't care about all your foibles and mistakes and what clothes you're wearing and, what car you drive and, all these silly things that humans care about. Dogs are just unconditionally, they just accept, they kind of see who we are, right? They see through all the surface stuff and they see that beautiful inner being of that beauty of our essence. And to me, this is what Animal Reiki practice teaches us to do, is to see past all the problems the animal has, which is what we often focus on. Oh no, they hurt their leg, or they have this skin condition, or they have this anxiety disorder, whatever it is. We start to define the animal by that. And with our meditation, we can see deeper and see the wholeness. So it's like we're returning the favor. Like, why do dogs, lower people's blood pressure and help older people live longer and everything? Because they are completely compassionately present with us without an agenda. And when they look at us, they see our true self. They don't get caught up in all the externals. Or even if we're sick, I remember when I was diagnosed with breast cancer 10 years ago, the way all the humans in my life looked at me completely changed overnight. It was just like, I was just like a tumor to them. And there was like sadness, pity, worry, fear, terror, people crying, it was terrible, except for my horse and my dog. Then when I went to see them after my diagnosis, they're like, Mom, I love you. What are we going to do today? They still saw who I was. Whereas the humans in my life didn't know how to do that. And I realized, gosh, I do the same thing to the people and the animals. I judge them by what's wrong. I see them through the lens of my own worries and fears, and that's not fair to them. But in the space of meditation, I can let that go and I can see deeper. And so I realized that this practice is a way to sort of give back for everything the animals give to us. And like you said, they give everything. They don't even think twice. It's really it's another way that they teach us, like how to love someone. They show us every single day, and not through telling us anything or heavy-handedly, but just by their gentle presence sitting next to us when we're working, or just walking with us on a walk through nature. Like, they just easily show us a better way to be together.
Hmm, that's amazing. Yeah, they come to think of it. When I moved to my neighborhood, I get married and live somewhere, and then I moved to where I currently live. We found a dog, and then we had another dog. For that dog, we wanted to have two so they could play with each other. Um, we were the only ones that had dogs in the neighborhood. I think there might have been in one other family. Now you look around and everybody's got a dog, and you wonder if that's because as the world became more and more crazy with all the stuff that's going on, we need the dogs to kind of bring our vibration up and to shoulder some of that anxiety and the fear, and also dogs just kind of seem to embody unconditional love. You mentioned present. I didn't think of that. They're very present with us, which is a good skill to learn. Humans have trouble with that. Reiki people probably are pretty good with it, but dogs embody unconditional love, and they shoulder our burdens, and they raise our vibration. And that's, I think, another way how they lead, how they teach us.
Mhm.
And we
Absolutely.
need
I mean, if
that.
if you think about like all the qualities that make us the best human beings, right? Well, I want to be more patient, and I want to be more kind. And we start listing off those qualities, and then you look at your dog and you're like, oh, if I could be as patient as he is, if I could be as kind as he is. I have a lot of my students who have over the years had their animal go through some kind of a surgery where they lose a limb. So I had just recently one of my students, her dog lost a leg, and for us, that would be traumatic, right? If we lost a limb, it would be, years of counseling, and, it would just be really devastating to us. Well, animals just pick up the next day. They go, oh, okay, well, I'll figure out how to do this on three legs. Let's go. Just the way that they have such an acceptance without judgment, and they just keep moving forward. It's these kinds of lessons. These are the lessons that we need to learn as human beings. And sometimes we can read about it in a book, but we learn things better by seeing it happening. And our animals are like showing us, like I talked about, my dog Dakota, the way that he went through his hospice and passing was much better than the way that I went through it. And animals understand the circle of life, and they know that there is a time to live and a time to die. And they're not vexed by it the way that we are as humans. And so that's another lesson, that they teach us. So for me, like the Let Animals Lead method is really about learning how to still our mind in a way that we are more open to be able to notice. Because I believe the animals are always teaching us. But the problem is most of the time we're not listening. We're multitasking, we're super stressed, or the way I like to say is, we're never here.
You're on the phone.
Yeah, we're on the phone. We're like, or we're like totally angry about something that happened yesterday. So we're like not even here, or we're totally worried about something that hasn't happened yet. And
Mhm.
something might happen tomorrow. We're so worried. So we're like everywhere else. We're not here, and that here-ness is something that our dogs and our cats and our horses, like I love being with my horse because when I'm with him, I'm completely there with him. And everything else in my life falls away for that period of hours that we're together. And that is such an incredible healing gift. We need more of that, and my meditation practice, when I'm sitting with my horse or I'm with my dog, that meditation practice helps me cultivate that. So I can remember, okay, wait a minute, be here now. That to me is the most healing way for us to live our lives.
Do you have an example of that kind of a meditation that you'd like to share with us?
Yes, I actually want to do a special, a little, just a short little meditation, but just for you guys to kind of get an idea of what Animal Reiki is like and what does it mean to like meditate with your animals. That's kind of strange. So I want to just do a little short practice with you guys.
Okay.
Okay. So I always like to start palms together. And this is like a symbol of gratitude. So it's a great place to start and end any meditation is in gratitude. So bringing our Gassho, our palms together, let's set our intention to dedicate all the energy of this practice to our animals. And if your animals are physically present with you, that's great. And if not, just bring them to your mind and heart, and they'll be with us in spirit. And then we can rest our hands on our lap, palms up or palms down, whatever is comfortable. And let's take a couple of nice deep breaths, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. And feeling yourself just being really present with the breath. One more. And then take a moment to just focus on your lower belly. There's an energy center that's your connection to the earth, your physical center of balance. In your lower belly, in the center of your physical being, you can visualize it as just a bright sphere of light, your hara. Just bring your mind there and see that light. And then we're going to see our breath now as a beautiful healing light. And as you breathe in, imagine you have roots coming down from the base of your spine, spreading into the earth. And breathe in that light from the earth. Bring it all the way up to the heart. And then as you breathe out, imagine any stresses from the day can release from you with that exhale, just out into the earth with love. The earth is strong, can hold all of that easily. Breathing in that earth energy up into the heart, and breathing out any stresses from the day. Breathing in the earth energy, breathing back out into your roots. And then I want you to imagine there are roots coming out, branches, coming out from the top of your head, from your crown. So we have roots going down into the earth and we have branches going up into the sky. And imagine the beautiful healing energy of the sky can flow down these branches into your crown, the top of your head, and down into the heart. So again, with the inhale, I want you to see that light coming down from the sky into the heart, down through the branches, breathing in. And breathing out, imagine it continues down and out your roots into the earth. And breathing in this light, beautiful, creative energy from the sky, down the branches, into the crown, into the heart. And breathing out into the earth. And see yourself now as a beautiful tree. You've got your roots and your branches and you're filled with this beautiful light of the earth and the sky. Now I want you to imagine that you are sitting next to a pond, beautiful healing pond. And just see yourself sitting as this tree, and there's maybe some shade from your branches in this beautiful pond. And imagine that that pond is filled with all of this wonderful healing, harmony, peacefulness, all this just good energy. And then imagine your animal that you invited into the space at the beginning of our meditation. Imagine they're sitting here next to you, next to the tree, shaded by your leaves, next to this beautiful healing pond. And just invite your animal to take a drink from that healing pond if they wish. It's completely up to them. They can drink in the peacefulness, the harmony, the presence, just being here in this moment. Imagine that pond is filled with all of the compassion of the universe. All is well. And just invite them to take a drink from that if they wish. It's completely up to them. And as this beautiful tree of light, you're just holding space with them and just allowing it to happen. And just feeling yourself as a part of nature, as a part of this beautiful scene with the pond and the earth and your animal in the sky. All is well, all is in perfect balance in this moment. And just see your animal as a part of this light of healing and compassion and peacefulness. The light that fills the pond, the light that fills your tree, this light also fills your animal. And you want to try to always remember to see them through these eyes. The eyes that all is well. There's nothing to do, nothing to fix, only just to be here in this moment, in the light, together. And then bring your hands back in, palms together, Gassho. And just take a moment to thank your animal for sharing this meditation with you, however they chose to connect in this moment, which is perfect. And remember that light and seeing them through those eyes, so that even beyond this meditation, we can remember to see their beauty and their essence. And setting our intention to finish, take a nice deep breath and slowly come back and open your eyes. So thank you. I hope that was helpful and relaxing. And, the way that we meditate with our animals is just as simple as just creating a peaceful space and inviting them in. And we invite them in just in our heart, in our mind. They're so sensitive. They feel our energy change when we go from like multitasking, stressed out, to calm, being here with them, and they'll be drawn to that space.
Excellent. So how could we learn more about Let Animals Lead?
So I teach online level 1 certification classes. My next classes are going to start the first week in March. So if you go to my website, animalreikisource.com, and you click on, I have a calendar, like upcoming classes. So if you click on that, there'll be the schedule, and I have a morning session and afternoon session, depending on your time zone and where you are. And it's an 8-week class. And so we break it down into 8 different lessons, and every week you have a meditation to do with your animals. And you can learn a lot from your animals. Really, that class, your animals will lead you and guide you.
Amazing. Sounds great. So what's your best contact information in case people have more questions?
Animalreikisource.com is my website. I have a blog on there with a ton of articles as well. I am on Facebook. I am on Twitter and Instagram and Pinterest. So you can pretty much find me everywhere. If you're interested in helping shelter animals with this, then my nonprofit, Shelter Animal Reiki Association.org, is the website for SARA, my nonprofit. And so you'll find a lot of information, articles about how this practice can help animals in sanctuaries, in shelters, help just make their time in these places much happier.
Excellent. So Kathleen, thank you so much for your time. That was amazing.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I'd also like to thank our audience for being part of our journey as well. And until next time, be well.